Hey guys, I'm Ethan Moore from Stockholm Supply. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. Rather than answering a question, I'm going to show you guys how to make a project that I've made many times. It's really simple. I made up a name for it. I'm not sure if this is a real thing that people do other than me, but this is what I call it. It really explains it pretty well what it is though. We're going to make a through inlay book-matched cutting board. So for wood, we're going to need two pieces. I want a piece of hardwood if I'm making a cutting board. If you're making like a cheese board or something, you can get away with a piece of softwood. I have a piece of quarter sawn red oak here. It's a really nice piece because you got all this nice tiger striping in there. You probably see that in the camera. And then you're also going to want a contrasting piece of wood. The better the contrast, the neater this is going to turn out. I have a piece of black walnut. This is a little scrap piece that we're going to end up cutting a veneer out of. Now for tools, we need three very important tools. Bandsaw. That's where we're going to do all of our cutting and our resawing, veneer cutting, all going to be done in the bandsaw. We're also going to need either a belt sander, a joiner, or a combination of the two, or a Flatmaster. I'm going to be using this Flatmaster drum sander. That's going to do all my flattening and sanding. Now the other tool that a lot of you guys own, unlikely you have it out in your shop right now, but you probably have it in your bathroom, or your wife does, is a curling iron. This is going to be kind of a fun little example of what we can do. Look forward to this. Alright, so let's get going. First step we're going to do, we're going to use the bandsaw. I just got my flat table, no fence, no little ripper, no nothing. And I'm going to do a little bit of freehand work. So what I'm going to do is cut, because I'm not very creative, I'm going to cut half a heart shape out of the board right here. You can do any shape you want. Half a heart for me is very simple, so that's why I'm doing it. Now, you'll notice I didn't draw a line or anything. On a bandsaw, it's very difficult to follow a line, so I just like to do everything freehand. It makes things a lot smoother and nicer, in my opinion. So let's go ahead and cut this. So that right there is my little heart. Now, if I were making this to actually sell to somebody, I may add 2 hearts or make that a little bit bigger. Because I'm just going to give this to my wife, I'm not that concerned. Now, the one nice thing though here, that blade, the width of that blade is 32 thousandths of an inch. So I'm going to set this heart here. I want you guys to look. Now that gap I just made is about, maybe a little bit over because of the vibration of that blade, is 32 thousandths of an inch. So I need to cut a veneer that's going to fit in that gap. So that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to use that piece of walnut, something nice and contrasting. So I like to use my little ripper. You guys have probably seen this before. I'm not going to get into too much detail on why this thing works so well, but you can do the same thing if you have a nice setup at home with a fence, or if you want to do it differently, you absolutely can, but you got to make sure that the veneer you're going to cut is accurate, is perfect. Because if it's not, you're going to have a whole bunch of gaps in that inlay. So that's what we're going to do here. Let me just clamp this piece of walnut in there. Alright guys, we got my piece of walnut set up in the little ripper. Now, if you look at the blade compared to the walnut, if I run my little ripper through, you can see the discrepancy there. The outside of this piece of walnut has got a big old warp in it, so my first cut, just going to be to straighten it out. Then I'm going to cut 2 or 3 pieces, and I'm not going to measure it just because I'm feeling lazy, but hopefully 1 or 2 of these pieces is going to be close to the right width. Let's see. Alright, here's my first cut. Now it's going to get noisy here. Okay, just by eye here, I cut 3 different pieces. This one here, that's probably about a 32nd of an inch. That'll be too thin. This one right here, somewhere in the middle between a 32nd and a 16th, and this one's a little bit closer to a 16th. Now I'll take a look and see which one fits best. Alright guys, we got our 3 different veneers. This one is thin. If we look at how this is when we place it in there and line everything up, you can see it's just not consistent. So this isn't the right thickness. And then this is my thickest one, close to a 16th. We got the same sort of issue. I already looked at this one. It doesn't line up properly. But this guy right here in the middle, this one lines up pretty well perfect. So if you look at that, that's right where we want it. So we're going to bend this guy right here. Now, back to our curling iron. This is a beautiful piece of equipment. Pretty soon, this is probably going to be sold in woodworking stores everywhere. Now, I will make one suggestion for you guys, for the guys, not necessarily the girls, but if you do buy one of these out in your shop, you're going to want to make sure it's blue. The pink ones are a little emasculating if your friends come over. Now, I will make one suggestion. Let your wife know that you have a curling iron out in your shop. Chances are, if she finds it out in your shop, one of two things has happened. Either that's her curling iron, and she's going to be really upset that you stole it, or she's going to have a lot of questions why there's some other lady's curling iron in your shop. So just be aware of that. So now, the way this works, we got this little piece of walnut here. Wood fibers, they really dislike stretching, but they don't mind compressing. So when something breaks as it's bending, it's always going to break on the outside. That's where the break will start. So what we're going to do here, we're going to compress the fibers around the curling iron. It's called hot pipe bending. I don't need, well, this is a hot pipe. I don't need to get a blowtorch out and steel pipe. My curling iron works wonderful. So we'll go ahead and do that. It'll take a little while for the fibers to heat up, but you'll see that it'll start to actually bend right around that iron here. So what I'm going to try to do is match the profile of that heart as best I can here. So slow and steady here. Alright. Alright, so there's the start of it here. Let's just see how this looks around my heart. So yeah, that matches up pretty good with the outside. So a little more bending up top. You get that profile right there I'm going to try to match. If I don't bend this like this, it's when you inlay that in there, it's just going to snap and break, and you'll see that. Alright, so make sure you bend it here first. And this doesn't have to be perfect. It's just got to be good enough that when you put it in there, it doesn't break. Okay. Now it does get pretty toasty on your fingers, but I'm tough. Okay, so let's see how this looks. There you go. That's actually pretty good right there. Maybe I'll do a tiny bit more right on the top there. Okay, so we got that veneer, so it's going to set in there really nice. Now we just got to glue it up. So that's what we'll do here. Now, I would recommend if you're using this in food, you're going to want something a little bit waterproof, because I'm just going to put an oil finish on this. So I'm using Type-On 3. Type-On 2 would work also. Let's glue this up here. My nozzle's a little plugged, so just bear with me. Oh dear. There she goes. No one's ever accused me of being an expert gluer. That's for certain. Alright, I'll spread that around decently. And then let's do the same thing on this here. Probably a little more glue than I really need. That's what I make sandpaper for. Okay, so slide that veneer in there. Actually, just gonna put a little more glue right there. And right here. Alright, got glue everywhere. Throw that veneer in there. Slide that baby in there. Now you're going to want to make sure that you have this end of my heart level with that end. And we're just going to clamp it. I just have a cheap clamp here. And we'll give her a nice squeeze. And that's going to be good enough there. Alright, we got her glued up now. The glue isn't 100% dry, but it's dry enough for what we're doing. I'm just going to break these little walnut tabs off here. And we're trying to make this flat. Now, if we're going to be book matching this edge here is got to be my flat edge. This has to be my jointed edge. Now, I'm not going to use a jointer. You would, at home, you can use your table saw, a jointer. If you don't have either of those things, you can do it pretty decently if you have a 6x48 belt sander. I'm going to use my Flatmaster to do it. When you sand it, it's never going to be perfect, but with the Flatmaster, it's going to be very, very flat. So it'll be good enough for a glue joint. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to flatten this over here. Get rid of those little things there first. Alright, now we'll run it across and flatten this joint too. Don't forget your dust collector. So that's my low spot right there. Do a few more passes. Still a little mark there. Getting pretty good at that end. So now, you can hear on that final pass, I was sanding consistently all the way across. I might make one more sand right where that walnut veneer is. It's a little bit proud. But other than that, yeah, that's pretty good. You probably can't tell that in the camera, but that's really close. Alright, so we're pretty well ready for a book match. Alright, we got her set up in the little ripper now. Now if you look right here, I've marked a line. That's the center point of my piece of oak here. So that means I'm going to cut the oak right in half. So I got the piece of oak set up in my little ripper. I got the blade lined up as best I can to the outside face of that board. So that way my pieces are going to be as consistent as possible. So let's make this cut here. Let me just line it up to that mark. Right about there, I'd say. And we'll cut. One little thing I want you guys to notice, you look right there, this is why I prefer using the little ripper. You see how much that piece of oak has opened up there? If I was cutting up against a fence, that stress, it causes a lot of issues. Now, one thing that's interesting, where I stop, if you listen, you can hear that blade's not rubbing on anything. It's straight up and down. All right, let's carry on. All right, so that's just the first brief look at my book match. Now, once I get some mineral oil on here, oh, I love that tiger striper. That's gonna look real nice. But you can see that there. We gotta glue that up yet, but that's gonna turn out pretty good. So here's my book match here. I honestly think it turned out pretty decent. We're gonna glue this up, and then we got some clamps here, and I'm gonna clamp it together. Now, once this is glued up, we're gonna have to sand it just to make sure everything is consistent. And once everything's sanded, then we'll put a little bit of mineral oil on there, and you'll really see that walnut pop here. Okay, so here's my joints. And we'll get my glue. The one thing I like about the Flatmaster sander, that's the sander I'm using here, the drum sander, is it really doesn't care about glue. You can sand right through glue, and it's really a bad habit on my part, but I'm never really very careful with my glue ups. Because I own one of these, I'm a little bit, what's the word, lax here. But we'll put some glue on there. Alright, so we'll put the book match side down. So we make sure that is totally flat. Oh, whoops. So that's the important side. Okay. So then line up your heart and the edges of your board. And tighten these clamps up a little bit. Now I'm going to spread this clamp out. Spread this guy out. Okay. And okay. Make sure everything's squared up. I'm just feeling the bottom of my board to make sure it's flat. And we are pretty good there. Alright, so you can tell it's a decent joint. We got glue squirting out all the way across there. I'm pretty happy with that right there. Alright, so I took it out of the clamps and I scraped as much of the glue off as I could. There's still quite a bit left, but we're not going to be too concerned about that. Pretty well all that's left here is to sand this. So I'm going to use the Flatmaster sander here. I got it set up with 2 different grits. So this is just basically on the maximum I can do with just 2 different grits on it. So this board's just under 12 inches wide. So let's sand it here. So if we look, I'm sanding the high spot, so it's got a little warp in it after last night, but there's a high spot here, and then there's a high spot over here, but every pass I make, that's going to get flatter and flatter. So let me just do a few passes here. So we're getting a lot closer, pretty well. There's a few bandsaw marks left in the middle and a little bit of the glue line left, but we're getting close to this being totally flat here. Okay, so I'm on the final stretch here. A little tiny bit of glue left here, a little tiny bit over here, and there's one little low spot right there you might be able to see in the camera. Now, you'll notice right through that glue joint that I was sanding, there's no glue on the sandpaper here. Very little load up on the sandpaper. That's one of the beautiful things about sanding with the Flatmaster. It makes very little heat, so when I'm sanding through a glue line, it doesn't tend to load the sandpaper. Let's carry on here. Okay, so we are good. So if we just take a look at that in the light, and there's no bandsaw marks left in there at all, that's ready for us to go to a finer grit. Let me see if I got, I'll have to rearrange the sandpaper a little bit. Just bear with me. Stop it. Okay, so now we got her finished out to a 220 grit. I wish you guys could feel that, but that's beautiful. So I've turned a board that was like this into a perfectly flat board. So that'll be my cutting board. Still got to do the back yet, but that won't take too long. Now you'll notice when I'm pushing the wood through, I'll push it one direction and then I'll rotate it 90 or 180 degrees. The reason I do that is when I'm pushing the wood through the sander, I have a tendency to push harder in certain parts of the board as I do in others. So by rotating it, it helps me maintain a consistent finish. So yeah, all that's left here, finish the backside, and I'll throw some mineral oil on it so you guys can see what it'll look like. All right. I'm just going to put some mineral oil on it here. Get an idea of what it's going to look like. Oh man, I like that. Okay. Wow. So that's finished out to a 220 grit with my Flatmaster here. So once you put the mineral oil, you can really see that heart. Now it's not in a, because of the lines in the oak, this is a standing dead oak tree that I sliced up. It's pretty dark, but it's kind of nice that it just sort of blends in with the pattern of that oak a little bit. And yeah, that tiger striping really pops when you put the mineral oil on there. So yeah, that kind of, it's a fun little project that you can do. If you have a few basic tools like a bandsaw, a sander, or a jointer, this is something that you can do at home pretty simply. Thank you guys for watching.